Hello, everyone. Today, we are so happy to welcome Dr. Lancaster. He is Professor Emeritus of Religion Study at the U.S. and University of Berkeley. For over 6 decades, Dr. Lancaster studied, researched, teaching, and practiced Buddhism. His teaching and research have the countless individuals around the world. Dr. Lancaster has published over 100 research articles and many books of Buddhism. He will receive many awards related with research Buddhism. And today, Sakya Buddha University includes faculty, students, are so happy to welcome Dr. Lancaster, have special speaker, the topics related with IAs and Buddhism. And please help me to welcome Dr. Lancaster to speak today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation today. I'd like to take you through a little bit of history so that you can, and all of us can understand the enormous contributions that have been made by people in the past and what we are doing with those. During World War II, what we would now call a computer engineer, but in those days was called just an engineer. His name was Turing, and Turing invented the famous machine that was called Enigma. And Enigma allowed the British to break the military code of the German Navy and Army. And as a result of Turing's ability to break that, the first mechanical, maybe, or the second, I guess, mechanical computer was constructed. In other words, they didn't yet have developed what we have today, which is a digital computer. They had a mechanical one, and it had many wheels, and it took a while, and it clanked and clicked and finally would turn out a result. We're lucky today that we have gone far beyond Turing. The first big computer that people had weighed 660,000 pounds. You can see it here. It took many people to operate. It took a whole room to fill. You realize that today we have 1,000 times the power of this computer in our phone. It's just incredible what's happened in terms of how far we've come from the days of ENIAC in 1945. Another big advance, which has been wonderful for us, was Bernard-Lee at CERN in Switzerland, just for a few people, set up what he called the internet. And that internet that he set out for a few people, beyond anything which he expected, went global. And it became the internet. And he, I think to this day, is shocked that his discovery became so popular and has become such a major part of our life. So it was called Hypertext Transfer Protocol. We're so familiar with saying HTTP, but I found that I can hardly ever find a person who knows what it stands for. And it stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And that was what he worked for and invented for us. So the internet came to us. It wasn't that we didn't have online things before. Admittedly, we did. My first use of any kind of online work was with ARPA, which was run by the US military. It was a research project, but Berkeley was connected to a few campuses, and we were beginning to communicate in a very difficult way with one another as we began to enter into the new world. And then came social media. Social media, and all of us need to be aware that social media has changed the world. And probably most of you have some kind of social media on your own computer and cell phones at this moment.
You see partly sunny weather and can expect a high of 76 degrees Fahrenheit.
You're hearing a little artificial intelligence. I have Alexa, and at this hour every day, she gives me the weather.
Tomorrow in Hacienda Heights,
You can hear the weather forecast being given.
76 degrees Fahrenheit and a low of 58 degrees.
The problem is I've never figured out how to turn her off. Anyway, the social media, particularly first YouTube, then Facebook, these became such a part of the world. And that this is part of the world which we in Buddhist studies are just beginning to figure out how to make use of. But millions of people around the world use them every day. It's their primary way of communicating with one another. And particularly during COVID, these social media usage just increased enormously as people used it to have some contact outside of their homes. So here's a very complicated looking slide, and it's only up to 10 years ago. ARPANET was replaced by Ethernet, which was replaced by the internet, which was replaced by the World Wide Web. And then we see all the internet things that developed: Google, AOL, Facebook. These are all the issues that have just come at us. As you can see, almost every year, a major development in how we communicate with each other online. So I wanted to give you just a little bit of quick history there before we go into the Buddhist side of the issues. The reason that I ask you to look back in the history is I think that we need to always understand that what we have today was given to us by somebody who worked very hard in the past. And we should not forget what that past is. Because if we forget what the past is, then we have trouble going forward, in my view, because we don't know where we came from. And that all of this is part and parcel of our everyday life, and it's part and parcel of what Buddhism is being challenged by in today's world. So let's turn to what's happened in Buddhist studies and the computer. In 1991, the first Buddhist text project was completed in Bangkok at Mahidol University. They computerized the Tipitaka, that is the sutra in the Pali Canon, and gave it to the king, whose picture you see here, the late king. They gave it to him for his 60th birthday. The king looked at it and said, I'm afraid people are going to misuse this. It's out there on everybody can look at it. But will they understand it, or will they misinterpret the Buddhist tradition? And so he said, I think that what you should do is to go forward and put in the Atthakatha, that is the commentaries, so that people can have both the sutras, the basic words of the Buddha, and they can also have the commentaries that were written to explain those words. And that was one of the great developments in Buddhist studies. And we owe a lot to the people who created it. They called it Buddhist. And I became involved with it. When it was first produced, this is how primitive things were. You had to send a hard drive to Bangkok, a hard drive. And they would take your hard drive and put the Polycanon data on the hard drive and then mail it back to you. Imagine what that was like. You had to wait days. You had to ship it off by air. You had to go through customs. You had all these issues just to get a copy of the digital Polycanon. So when I started visiting them, I suggested, let's put it on a CD-ROM. Let's make it available in a way which will be easily available to people. And so we did. We transferred the data to the new technology of the time called a CD-ROM. Nowadays, it's old hat. You can hardly believe that I would say this is new technology. Who wants to use a CD-ROM today? But when it came out, we had the whole of Polycanon on a single disc. I arranged for it to be sold by the American Academy of Religions Publications Committee. And they sold quickly over 400 of these discs with the entire Polycanon on them. And no library that we could find had the complete Polycanon in paper. And suddenly now, 400 people and institutions had the whole of it in their hands. When I went to Thailand and visited one of the users, the CD-ROM was on the altar, and they were recognizing that it's sacred. It has the words of the Buddha, and they put it on the altar. I'm not sure they actually looked at it, but they put it on the altar and paid great attention to it. So the first thing that appeared in this was in the Pali. In Taiwan, a group there at Dharmadram University, a Buddhist-inspired and supported university, started what became the center of Buddhist studies for the computer called CBETA, Chinese Buddhist Electronic Text Association. CBETA was beyond anything that we had ever had before. You could go to CBETA and see the whole of the Chinese Buddhist canon. You could go to CBETA and search for words, definitions, interpretations, commentaries. It was the go-to, if you use those words, It was the go-to thing for years. Taiwan became the center of Buddhist studies, and primarily through C Beta and what they put together. I began to work on a project that I felt was very important. In Korea, we have still 13th century printing blocks for the whole of the Chinese Buddhist canonic texts. There are over 80,000 blocks carved on both sides in this storage unit. It's worth a visit if you ever go to Korea. Go to Haeinsa to see it. It's a wonderful thing. It's located in very interesting buildings. The buildings are open. They have holes in the wall and in the floor. And it gets cold and it gets hot in Korea. But the way they have developed, the inside of this place is never more than 3 degrees different from the outside. So there's no huge change in temperature that causes the blocks to expand and contract, which would split them. So I was working with this because when I arrived at Berkeley to start teaching in 1967, they had just purchased a set of rubbings from these blocks on big, huge pages, each 2 pages to contain 1 block and the rubbing of it. They had made 12 sets of rubbings from those over 80,000 printing blocks, and Berkeley had published them or had purchased them. So I was there. I had just come to Berkeley. I was an acting assistant professor. I was worried about keeping my job, hoping they would not get rid of me, and I didn't have tenure. And they said, would you help the library catalog these materials? And I said, yes, sure. And so for 7 years, I worked on those rubbings and made a catalog, which is online. You can go and use it online. It's the Korean Buddhist catalog of the Korean Buddhist canon. Charles Mueller digitized it at the Tokyo University and put it online for everybody to use. I began to work with it, and I was aware that in order to deal with all the data that came in the computer, we needed to have imagery. And the reason that we wanted to have imagery is because you can communicate so much faster with an image than you can with any other thing. So once at Berkeley, a computer engineer gave a talk, and I went to hear his talk. And he told me that he was going to teach me something in 1/10 of a second that was very complex. And I kind of smiled and thought, yes, sure, let's see him do it. And so he filled the screen in front of us in the room, the computer screen, with 1 million blue dots. And then he changed one of those blue dots to a red dot for 1/10 of a second. And everybody in the room saw it. We all saw that flash of red. And he said, do you realize what you just did? You disambiguated 1 out of 1 million in 1/10 of a second. That's the power of images. So I became really fascinated and decided that I would try to bring this idea into Buddhism. And so I talked to Howie Land, who was my computer helper, and I said, Howie, let's take the rubbings and turn the rubbings into, instead of the characters, let's turn the rubbings into blue dots. And behind each blue dot, we'll put 30 different markups. Where the dot is, what character it is, when it was translated, who translated it, all of that data behind it. And then when we do a search and we see what our search is, it will show us very quickly what we want to know, because it will take us there in a tenth of a second. And we did that. But then I did another thing. I decided to try what would happen if I put the Buddhist canon into blue dots. And then I took the blue dots and put them into 3D virtual reality and made them 12 feet high and put them in a 360-degree immersive environment. What you see here is me. I'm walking through this virtual reality of the Buddhist canon put into blue dots. And I have, in that space around me, 200 pages of the Chinese Buddhist canon. And whenever I search for something, it turns that blue dot red, and I can easily see where my target word is. I really have enjoyed walking through the canon. So if you ever go to City University in Hong Kong, they still have this up. You can go and walk through the Chinese Buddhist canon if you would like. Many other digital projects began to appear. One was done by University of the West in Los Angeles under the direction of Sakya. And he digitized and put into the computer the Sanskrit Buddhist canon and all the editions of the Sanskrit that are available to us. It's been a great service to a lot of people. He is now digitizing and taking imagery of the manuscripts and putting the image of the manuscript. So when you search, your search will not come up with a computerized font, but it will come up with a picture of the actual manuscript and the word you're looking for highlighted on the manuscript. It's just the thing that we can do with imagery. Another thing that happened was Gene Smith. Gene was the Library of Congress Asia director. That is, he ran the Library of Congress of the United States government in its international base. And Gene did an interesting thing. He took some of the money that he had, and he went to the Tibetan monks who were fleeing from Tibet because of the Chinese treatment of Buddhism in Tibet. And as they came to Delhi, where he was located, he went to them and he bought the right to photograph their rare manuscripts that they carried with them out of Tibet. And then he made 25 copies that were printed in India, and they were sent to 25 campuses in the US. The money that he used was called PL 480, Public Law 480. This was because in the 1960s, there was a famine in parts of India, and the US sent them grain, wheat, millet, and had to technically charge them for it. So a lot of money began to accumulate until finally, because of the amount of wheat and other things flowing into India, the US owned basically all the Indian currency. And we could never make use of it because it would have wrecked the economy of India. So instead, we passed a rule that India could repay us by giving us a copy of everything they published. And so we bought 25 copies of everything published to send to American University, 25 American University libraries. And this was the work of Gene Smith. He's passed away, unfortunately, but he's left behind his legacy in the Buddhist Digital Resource Center, and all the Tibetan material is available. That is available there with his prefaces that he wrote to many of these very rare manuscripts. It's a wonderful thing. I started another project. I met Sarah Kenderdine. She was then a professor in Australia. And Sarah was a wonderful photographer. And we decided to take one of my projects and to photograph it. The project was that I felt we had misrepresented the way in which Buddhism spread from India to China. The only thing we knew was the Silk Road. The only thing that you read about was that it went by caravans through Inner Asia, across the Himalayas, into China, to Xi'an. And that was the route, and things did go that way. But I realized that Buddhism also traveled by sea. It went from all the seaports through Southeast Asia to Guangzhou in China in particular. And so Sarah and I set about to document that spread of Buddhism. She spent 7 months photographing all of the ports because, of course, ships pass in the night and leave nothing behind. We don't have what we have in Central Asia, where you've got ancient cities that are just in ruins. You've got something where you can do an archaeological dig. With the sea, we don't know, we don't have a way to deal with it. But we do know how people traveled. We know where the winds were. We know when they traveled. We know how the merchants traveled. And so we put together an atlas of maritime Buddhism. It now has been made into a 3D virtual reality exhibit at the Buddha Museum in Kaohsiung in Taiwan. and it's been very popular. Something like 4 million viewers have gone through and seen our 3D virtual reality exhibit of how people traveled from India to China by sea. And that, I think, is corrects some of our Buddhist teachings, because I got so tired of reading all about the Silk Road and then one sentence. And some of Buddhism went by sea, period. Don't tell you how, we don't tell you when. We just tell you, yes, oh, well, some went by sea. Insignificant, right? We made it significant, I think. Well, the computer was coming on fast, and we had the appearance of an almost magical source of knowledge called Google, done by Larry Page and Sergey Brin, two young computer engineers. What a difference they've made in the world. We have changed Google into a verb. We say, oh, Google it, and have looked up and find information. Never before have we had such a tool. And we can use Google Scholar to look at all of the journals of the world, just about, and see articles. So if you want to know about Buddhism, and you want to know what's been done in Buddhist studies, Google Scholar is the best source that you can use, in my estimation. It not only tells you where the documentation is found, but it allows you to actually go and read the documentation. It's been an enormous, enormous contribution to Buddhist studies, and we should all thank them. And then came, I'm not sure I can ever pronounce this name. OpenAI, Ilya Sutskever. He did a wonderful thing. He made OpenAI free without any restriction. Instead of making a huge fortune, he did make a lot of money, but he could have made even more money. He created something which we had never seen before. And it starts from a very simple thing. It starts from the flow of language. What word follows what the next word? So that's why when you type, sometimes you get really upset because AI will take over and tell you and put in a lot of words that you don't want. No, that's not what I mean. But that's how AI works. And it has become so powerful that it is changing our lives in ways which we have never known before. And we have to figure out how to live with it. Well, when he did it in 2015, 7 years later, another young engineer, Sam Altman, developed ChatGPT. And ChatGPT is a working software for artificial intelligence. I'm sure many of you have used it. If you haven't, you should. It's very helpful. When it first came out, a lot of people said, oh, it's just a way to cheat. People will get it to write their papers for them. But as you know, ChatGPT, you can ask it to tell you something, and out comes all this data. We have to still edit and still have to judge it, but it's getting better, it's getting faster. And there's now a prediction that in 7 years, all of the information on the internet will be done by artificial intelligence. We will not be typing in any of the information ourselves. Artificial AI will find data and create all of the material which you read on the computer. We're almost there now, not quite, almost. And so when Sam Altman was able to make this ChatGPT work, now we're into an era of artificial intelligence, which is far more complicated than anything that an individual can keep up with. So I want to close my formal lecture and open up for questions from you. I'd like to hear from you. I'd like to hear what you are interested in and what part of this is something that you are involved with. But I will say this. Larry Page, who has been one of the CEOs of YouTube and other things, very smart man. And he said, everybody needs to know that the new technology will be used. And if you don't use it, you'll be left behind. You must keep up with the technology. Otherwise, you'll become irrelevant. Nobody will want to hear anything you have to say because they can have something so much more sophisticated created by artificial intelligence. There are dangers in this. There are dangers that it will become biased. It's going to create data. We don't know where it gets the data from. We need to make sure that we try to hold on to some control of how this new material works. But be assured, it is here. It is here to stay. If you don't use it, you'll be left behind. I guarantee it. You will have no great place in the next generation. They will be so much, AI will be such a part of their life that if Buddhism does not enter into the world of artificial intelligence, it will become irrelevant, I believe. Well, I'm going to stop here and ask you to share with me some of your thoughts and questions, if you will. So, Venerable Minhai, can I turn it back over to you to maybe keep us in line as we go into a question and answer period?
Yeah, yes, thank you so much, Dr. Lancaster.
While we wait for that question, Rifai, I have a question. Dr. Lancaster, as long as I understand AI or computer or whatever is very much garbage in, garbage out. So even AI, you get the information from incorrect source, they will spit out the incorrect answer. How do we prevent that?
Yes, that's of course possible. Well, one thing is to ask AI the question in several different ways to see whether or not it has the right information in there. It just, the prompt, that is the question that you gave it, caused it to give a wrong answer. So how you prompt, how you ask the question is really important. So it's better to realize that instead of maybe asking the whole long question, which may be difficult, take it in increments and lead up to your question where you can see how the AI is dealing with it. If you feel that it's wrong, you can say to it, what you've given me, this part is wrong. Would you go back to your sources? Or what I often do is I say, tell me, what is the source for the sentence where you say, and then I quote. And when it gives me, for example, I recently was working on the history of one of the Buddhist art forms called the pensive prince, where the pensive prince is shown holding his hand up to his cheek, thinking. And it's very popular in Japan and Korea. And I found that there are many, many of these in the Shandong Peninsula of China. When I asked ChatGPT, where does the pensive prince first come into Buddhism? It said in Gandhara. I'd never heard that before, and I thought, I think this is a mistake. So I said, ChatGPT, what is your source for saying it started in Gandhara? And it gave me a title of a work, and it actually gave me the page to look at. So I went to Google and I brought up that volume and I went to that page, and lo and behold, there in Pakistan and Afghanistan, where Gandhara was, there is the image of a pensive prince. I didn't know it before. I had to change my lecture. I thought it was wrong, and lo and behold, it was right. But I understand your question, that we have to be very careful, and we double check, and that's pretty easy to do. And we can ask for the source, and we can go and look at the source. And one should do that before you quote something which you feel is questionable. Thank you for that question. It's a good one.
Dr. Lancaster, we have several more questions for you, so I'll go one by one for you. AI can present the totality of human knowledge, but is it capable of cultivating our compassion for humans?
You know, when you use AI and you have a bot, a BOT from robot, and the bot gives you something, and you ask the bot, are you human? The bot will come back and tell you, no, I'm not. I'm a computer program. So I do not have the emotions of a human. And I think that the people who are creating this are well aware that emotional material is really difficult to put into a computer where you're just putting in words and to a robot. It's difficult to do that. And I don't know that we should try to ask it yet to do it. Will the time come when when a bot will have emotion. Some scientists now say yes. Some say we're already there. Others say, no, we're not. I think we're not there yet. Whether we'll ever get there, I don't know either. So I don't use AI for emotional material. Now, people are using bots in all kinds of ways. If you have something where the same question is asked over and over by people, it's much better to just give that to a bot to answer. If people are asking, what are the 3 jewels of Buddhism? And the answer is going to be the same. So it's easier to just say to people, you know, go to AI and you'll find this information. I shouldn't have to tell it to you. Use me as a teacher in a different way. You don't have to use me as a way to get basic information. Basic information is already at hand, and it's better for you to have the ability to access that without constantly having to turn to me. So I agree that we'll never probably, and in a way, I hope it's so. I'd like to feel that we humans have something that will outlast the computer. But it's true that right now, you cannot ask the computer to cultivate and practice its self-compassion. It can tell you about it, but it can't be it. Okay, another question.
Yep. In the same line of thought, Doctor, so do you think that AI can understand the mental states beyond the language or the prompt that's entered? So understand the feelings of the users entering the prompts?
Well, I think that people are trying to work toward that. Remember, AI is very new. You know, it's just a little over a year old. This is all new stuff. Will there come a time when I can go online to a bot and ask it a question where I state, I'm really sad. I've had a great loss in my life. Can you help me? And I believe that you can train a bot to help people, even with such complex questions.
Yes, sir. I hear Thiong Phước have the raised hand, and can you add the question to Doctor?
Thank you. Can you hear me, Dr. Lancaster?
Yes, I can.
Yes. Okay. So my question is, I work a lot with kids on Buddhism. And the question is, how can I utilize AI to assist me to spread Buddhism within the younger generations now that it's very difficult to do that with kids nowadays? So is there a way that AI can help me with that? Thank you.
It's probably not presently existing, but what you're saying is something which needs to be done. So what I'm saying to you is that you, as someone trying to work with Buddhist material with children, you are the one who needs to be training the GPT in this area, because you do know a lot about what works and what doesn't work with children. So you need to not just use or depend on bot to give you something you don't have. You also need to get into the creation of the solution. And that's my real message to all of you. We all need to be involved in trying to create ways in which this new technology will meet our needs. We need to figure out how we can train it to meet our needs. And I believe it has many solutions that we can be able to allow people to get to very easily in the future. So there are all kinds of apps that belong to AI now, and their apps are appearing every hour. It's good. It's incredible how much there is coming up and on the internet for us to use. And the question is, who has time to even look at all of them to decide which one is a good one? It's very difficult. So we need to have people who will help us understand how to use the bot to the best advantage of that bot. And we need people like yourself who have skills, who are deeply involved in practice, to begin to figure out to what degree can you train a bot to help people do what you teach them, you're now currently teaching them to do. Is it possible you can figure out a way to help the bot do that? So I think we can't just use it and despair that it won't do what we want. Then it's going to happen. So it may turn out stuff that we don't want. So we have to do it. I feel my generation, we really failed with television. We didn't make television an educational tool. We gave it over to the entertainment world. We gave television away. We didn't use it in our schools. We didn't have our teachers producing television shows. The shows that were produced, a few, were done by industry and had industrial needs. So I feel with the computer, we didn't really we haven't really fully used the computer. When I first started using it, I just used it as a typewriter. It took me a long time to realize, oh, this has power to do far more than what I'm doing with it. So all of you who are currently doing something yourself, you know how to do it, or you have some ideas about how to do it. Think of how you can train the bot so that it does do that. And you make a great contribution by doing that. So I didn't answer your question, but I gave you a challenge.
Thank you, Professor.
Sure. Thank you.
Maybe, yes, maybe we have one more question.
We do have two more questions, and it's geared towards Buddhism. So one of the questions we have is, how should the Buddhist community change its practice methods in the face of AI?
Well, I think that this is exactly what we need to find out. We don't know right now. We're just now beginning to learn what AI is. and what it can do. So whatever we can work with so that we can train AI to produce what we need, that's what we need, what we have to do. So how should we do it? You know, I wish that I had all the answers, and nobody has the answers yet. We're still in this preliminary stage of exploration, finding out what works and what doesn't. So it's very exciting. If you're in a period of uncertainty, or I'm uncertain about how AI is going to be used, the state of uncertainty can be really very exciting because it leaves you with enough space to explore, to experiment, to try something, to see what works and what doesn't work. Every one of you has the chance to use AI and see what it works for you. What doesn't work? It's in an uncertain state, but it's in a potential state that's quite exciting. And I think you said there was one more question.
Yep. It's in line of the previous questions, but this is geared towards educational level. So our university, Sakya Buddha University, we are preparing to establish an AI Dharma system. And according to you, what is your recommendation where a university level to start?
Well, I believe that every university should be desperately working on AI and exploring how to best use it. And every university should have at least some staff people who are devoted to this task, because it's that important. It's not just a nice thing to do, it's a crucial thing to do. And I can't answer all these questions so quickly because, you know, if I give this talk again in a week, things are changing. It will be a different talk a week from now in terms of some of the material and things that are developing. So yes, every university should be working very hard on this right now. Don't wait. Jump in as quickly as you can, because otherwise you'll not be able to catch up.
Again, thank you so much, Dr. Lancaster, and thank you so much for everyone to join on a special speech today. Yeah, the last, that is my question. That is the last question. Maybe, yes. You mentioned AI is a challenge for the human being. And how do you suggest the best way to use AI in Buddhist education, including our university, to teaching and learning?
Well, as I'm trying to say, I think we need to answer your question. Right now, there is no answer. There is no answer. You yourself, having asked this question, have the best chance of anybody, because you've asked this question, because you're aware of these issues, to begin work on finding the potential answer to what you're saying. And no answer is going to be that long lasting, because AI is changing so much. We have to learn that we will just be swimming through life in the future. You can't stand still. It's like a river flowing, and you have to go with it. And if you don't, you are going to be buffeted and you're going to be hurt by it. So I don't mean to ignore or evade the questions. I'm just telling all of you, we don't have answers to this yet. Nobody has it. Even the smartest of the people that I listen to giving their lectures, they don't have the answers either. But all of us can, at least in our own little way, see what answers work for us with the material and the needs that we have. So those of you in a Buddhist university, you know what you want to teach. How do you best teach it? And how do you best teach it to the next generation? How do you put it on a handheld device? How do you make it available to somebody 24/7? These are all the challenges, I think, that are before Buddhist educators today. So thank you, Venerable Menhai, for giving me this opportunity to join your class and to see wonderful work that you're doing. Thank you so much.
May the Buddha bless you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And goodbye to everybody.
Thank you. Have a good night and bye-bye, everyone.